Tuning is one of the most important aspects of making a flute. Right here at High Spirits, we really put a lot of focus in on that, because the truth is, yeah, a flute can be really pretty, but it's got to have a great voice and it's got to be in tune. There's a little bit of variable. As a matter of fact, it's quite a bit of variable actually when it comes to tuning. Tuning is affected by so many things. And when we tune the flute at High Spirits in Patagonia, in Arizona, we keep the room at about 70 degrees because temperature will affect tuning. If it's too warm, it's going to change the tuning. Whatever tuning we set it to, you get it into a cooler temperature, it could go flat. If it's too cold, below 70, then again, it's the same thing. Because you get it into a warmer climate, it's going to go sharp. So there is a parameter that we use for tuning. Tuning is affected by temperature, it's affected by heat, it's affected by moisture, humidity. It's affected by the amount of the breath that we put into it, the amount of pressure we put into it. It's amazing, it's so subtle. So when it comes to tuning, and when you're starting to play, please keep in mind that when the flute leaves at High Spirits, we've tuned it to 440 or 432 in an environment that is average, and the amount of pressure that we put into it, the amount of pressure we put into the flute, we look at it as sort of an average pressure. We've been playing, those of us that tune here, we've been playing a long time, so we have a good sense of average pressure. There's a tendency to play a little bit louder. We want to, we really want to punch it, Well, it's going to drive, as we put more pressure and more air in it, it's going to drive the flute sharper. Some of us are a little bit more conservative, and we're just a little more shy when it comes to playing, and we tend to put very little pressure into the flute. It makes it flat. So there are so many variables when it comes to this. So when you go to play, if you're finding that your flute is a little flat, or it's sounding a little dull, add a little bit more pressure. Tongue it a little bit more. Just see where that takes you. Experiment with it. We're there to help. But we're also asking you to really utilize some of the skills that you have and the skills that you're developing to see where the flute takes you. So in other words, when you're playing and it sounds a little, little sharp to you, you back off a little bit on the breath. One thing that we also find is that as you play the flute from the bottom note, that is the hardest note to play, only because if you put too much pressure into it, it's going to break. But as you go up the scale, add a little bit more pressure into the flute. If you don't, what tends to happen is you kind of get a flat sound. It just loses some of its ambience, So if you get that, as you go up, if you feel like, that note's a little lazy, add some more pressure to it. Play with it. Start really playing with that a little bit. And using the embouchure at the end of the flute is really important, because what it also does, it gives you a chance to control the pressure. If you're just putting the flute in your mouth, you have very little control in that, because there's a chamber right here. And that chamber buffers the pressure. So it doesn't pressure for you. So you have to create that. By it's almost like you're kissing it. Look at the video on embouchure. The embouchure allows you to really control your breath, to see how much to put in, how little to put in. Tuning is, it's actually, it's got a lot of variable to it. So, and every instrument does. Guitar, strings, they get tuned, and all of a sudden it heats up and the neck on the guitar bends just a hair, making notes either sharper or flatter. So every instrument is subject to some variables when it comes to tuning and playing it in tune. So please keep that in mind when you're playing, when you start to play and you're going like, something doesn't sound right. Play with it. Really inject more air, a little bit less air. Just start kind of getting to know the instrument. Because each one is very, very unique. They have their own personality. Each instrument, each key, they have their own personality. Get to know it and play with the tuning.